Elon Musk's DOJ committee hasn't been able to turn up any serious evidence of fraud, waste, or abuse yet, but did manage to get a win out of White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Let's roll this clip talking about a Politico scandal.
I can confirm that the more than 8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening. The DOJ team is working on canceling those payments now. Again, this is a whole of government effort to ensure that we are going line by line when it comes to the federal government's books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people? Is this a good use of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not, that funding will no longer be sent abroad, and American taxpayers will see significant savings because of that effort.
Oh boy, this was a wild one yesterday. Normally, it wouldn't be the kind of thing we're talking about, Krystal, but it rose to the level of the White House press secretary claiming that they're going to come in and cut off these payments. So to bring people up to speed, what happened here, USAspending.gov is a website that turns out to be very dangerous if you don't know how to use it.
Okay.
So people went in and searched somehow Politico and came up with this idea that Politico is funded by USAID. And that then was connected to the fact that Politico had recently had a glitch in their payroll. And so some Politico reporters didn't get paid. And was then also connected to the fact that Politico had been one of the many news outlets that had reported on the letter from 50 former intelligence officials.
The hallmarks of Russian disinformation, infamous letter.
That infamous letter. So they said, aha. So USAID, the State Department basically, CIA, the deep state funded Politico. Politico then laundered this letter from these intelligence officials to benefit Biden, and then gets all of this money from USAID, and then Musk finds out about it, cancels the money, and now all of a sudden Politico can't make payroll. Like, wow, we've got them. Incredible. So, in fact, to me, actually, these guys did actually stumble on a scandal, which is the way that a lot of our Beltway media is funded, which is Politico Pro, Bloomberg, a whole...
Some of the newsletters.
All of these trades. So,
sort of insider trade publications,
and
basically.
it goes back many decades to the advent of this trade, what's called a trade publication. So if you are either a government official at the Department of Transportation, you own a trucking company, you own a shipping company,
you're a lobbyist.
Or more particularly, exactly, you're a lobbyist for those people, you really want to know what every lawmaker on the subcommittee that oversees your industry is thinking up to the minute, and you want to know what the commissioners and the senior staff at the agency that regulates you are up to at the moment. And you're not going to find that in the New York Times or Drop Site or here on Breaking Points. We're not getting into the weeds like that.
Very specialized, down to the subcommittee kind of knowledge.
In fact, it's lobbying intelligence is an entire thing. Lobbyists whose job is not to actually lobby, to pressure members of Congress to do a thing. It's just to find out information and then deliver it privately to different corporations that pay for it. This is the same thing, really. Politico Pro, Bloomberg, all these others that do this. And so they charge through the roof for this.
Thousands of dollars because they know that, first of all, it's not coming out of any individual's pocket.
Right.
It's coming out of either the government or the lobby shop or the corporation or whatever. So for them to spend a few $1,000s on this information that's going to prove valuable to, if you're a corporation, your bottom line, that's nothing.
Right. And so I think it's a reasonable question. Does a government agency need this?
But we're talking about people here who are raising these questions who are capitalists, who would presumably just appreciate the hustle here.
Right, and this is over more than a decade, by the way.
Yeah.
This amount of money.
Well, the other thing
and
that's
not
funny,
all of it is Politico, not all of it is USAID. It's a complete
and even
misreading.
the number is wrong. So $8 million, they make it sound like, they got $8 million from USAID in a year. Even that's not true. Is $8 million over a decade
from all
government agencies combined. Now, again, I still think the business model is sort of preposterous, whatever. but it's wildly different than how it was presented. And then the other thing that's funny to me, Ryan, especially talking to you, is that you guys have actually done reporting about some news agencies that USAID has actually funded.
Right.
And I don't think any of these people cared anything about it.
Right. Now they're interested.
Now
They're starting to notice. And Michael Schellenberger actually did a piece based on or advancing some of our recent reporting. So now they're starting to see. But yes, USAID does fund journalism that's done in foreign countries, and that journalism is often geared towards U.S. interests.
Yeah.
That is a thing, and that should be probed and should be scrutinized. They're not funding now. I had sent this. I don't know. Maybe we can add this in post. It's gotten even more absurd. We can go back to Politico in a second, but the New York Times got lumped into this scandal. Somebody went through and typed in New York into usaspending.gov and pulled up a number of like $29 million or something like that, saying that the U.S. government is funding the New York Times to the tune of $29 million. Turns out, bro, and so it's Ian Miles Chong, it's like a completely unreliable online figure.
Yes.
And then Huberman, who has a massive following, shares it, and he's like, I have to speak out now. This is outrageous. This money could have been spent doing NIH research. It's like, as Lee Fong points out, they searched New York, not even New York Times. So New York University gets a lot of money for research, et cetera. Anything with the word New York in it showed up in here. And in the old days, so to speak, this wouldn't matter. This would be like kind of funny that like people got this kind of thing wrong. Because Twitter X has now taken on this like central place in the MAGA ecosystem, what goes viral there becomes just quote unquote true, and then gets sent to the press secretary, and then the press secretary responds to it, even though it's just fundamentally wrong. And the inability of the community notes to respond to this stuff is also very telling. Like, this is just wrong, but it's not getting noted for the most part.
Yeah, and even if it was, I don't know that it would really matter. I mean, Elon Musk himself is the most community noted person on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it hasn't stopped anyone, well, it has, I mean, some people don't believe his nonsense, but plenty of people do, regardless of the fact that he will just, take a claim like this and spread it like it's nothing and without thinking twice about it. So, yeah, it's a total construction.
It was D3. I don't know if we put that up already.
Yeah. It's a very it's a very post-truth, postmodernist kind of a reality. And you're right that now it used to, the Biden people back in 2020 were able to win with this bedrock assumption that what happens online isn't real life. Mm-hmm. And that's just not true anymore.
Right.
Now what happens on Twitter, as preposterous as it is, they have filled this administration in part with people who are good posters. I mean, that's basically how J.D. Vance ends up as vice president of the United States.
Right.
And Elon Musk has, obviously he has a number of power sources, but one of them is the fact that he runs this platform to his own benefit, including something else that you've talked about, Ryan, including silencing critics from within MAGA. Mm-hmm. So, Elon is a Javier Milei fan, an anarcho-capitalist, a fan of this tech feudalist nonsense, crazy. And it is directly at odds with the Steve Bannon populist right ideology. I mean, Steve Bannon will tell you that in quite existential terms. Go read his, interview with the New York Times. And so the kind of original MAGA type people like the Laura Loomers of the world, who were going out and trying to push back against this direction, which is an existential threat to the, populist right Steve Bannon-esque view of what Trump should be and what he should be doing. It truly is. Elon Musk is an existential threat to them. They have been vanished on Twitter and suppressed, and you no longer really see them bubbling up. So it has become this incredibly influential platform that has a direct pipeline into what is coming out of the press secretary's mouth, which is why we have to pay attention to stupidities like making up these numbers about Politico and New York Times.
And then what you will then see is that the most absurd and incorrect claims will end up getting noted.
Yeah.
And then that gives credence to ones that aren't noted. And so, for instance, now finally, this Ian Miles Chong one does have a community note. And so they'd be like, hey, this guy is saying it's the New York Times. Actually, it's New York. This guy's saying it's the last 5 years. It's not he didn't run it for the last 5 years. Because if you don't put the time in right on USA Spending, it gives you like
for a decade or whatever.
Time.
Yeah.
And then what they're noting here is that the actual total to the New York Times over 5 years would be 1.6 million, but most of that is from the Department of Defense, Pentagon. These are people in the Pentagon or service members who subscribe to the New York Times and expense it to the government. Like, so instead of uncovering some scandal, they just discovered like people read the New York Times.
For better or worse. Maybe to them that is quite a scandal, I guess.
They still do.
All right, we've got David Dayen standing by to break down some of the legal challenges and legal movement, pushback against Doge, pushback against the Trump administration. Some new court decisions have come down, so let's get to that.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.